Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick with me? Famous scenes with drama queens and heroes acting out there on a silver screen. Come grab a seat, the popcorn is on me.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Hello, welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. Noel T. Manning II here, and today we're going to explore how the MCU can point us to something much deeper. And not that you need to get deeper, because the MCU is deep itself, especially if you've watched all 5,222 films. You know there's depth there. Joining me today is Dr. Robert Prickett. He is a professor and dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Gardner-Webb University, and together we're going to hopefully tackle some of these thought-provoking questions that are out there. You know, what do we learn about God and humanity from the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Dr. Prickett, so glad to have you with us, and glad to have your expertise as we dive into this.
No, my pleasure. I'm excited to do this.
So we think about this. Tony Stark has redemption. Spider-Man has this sense of responsibility. The Avengers, they're this dysfunctional family. Thanos has this moral paradox. These stories, when you really think about them, they're more than just entertainment. There really is some depth there. They invite us, I think, to wrestle with themes of faith, of purpose, of sacrifice, and what it means to be human. And all those questions have brought you to teaching this. You've given lectures on it. You've given presentations on it. Let's talk about your love first of the comic books, graphic novels, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Take us back to where this happened, and when did you want to dive in a little deeper to this in pop culture?
Sure. So I am an English education academic, which means I taught high school English for several years, and then I started teaching the people that were going to go in to be high school English teachers. And one of the things that came out of that is truly again, I have been a child of pop culture. My entire, movies were a common thing. I worked in the local video store back in the day for a little bit. Pop culture has always been a part of it. And again, my dissertation is actually written about how teachers bring movies into classrooms and utilize them. And so, again, it's always been an interest for me in terms of that. When I started teaching, though, the other love that came out is I have also always loved young adult literature, graphic novels, the content that speaks to the high school student or the middle school student is what has fascinated me on the English side of my brain. And so, I was always, the weird guy on the airplane going to an academic conference reading, the Harry Potter that had just come out or, along those lines. And so as the MCU grew and as it became this kind of cultural behemoth moment, I started looking at it and remembering all of my past loves of comics and everything else. And so at the time I was at Winthrop University and developed a course called The Literary Merits of Marvel. And it was an English class that we looked at the texts of Marvel as if it were great literature and talked about kind of the concepts through that. So that has been a part of it. Most of my academic writing is either young adult lit or graphic novels. That's where I tend to work in terms of my academic research side and scholarship side of things. And at Gardner-Webb, as you are well aware, we have a weekly Dimensions, which is the equivalent of most people would know as a chapel service during the week for our students. And Josh Parrott asked me to come in and if I would do a talk for a series that they're doing for faculty that they bring in for the Dimensions. And it's been, what do we learn about God and humanity from fill in the blank? I know he's had biologists talk and, all these other academics talk about things. I think secretly he enjoyed the fact that My particular area would be Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that is what I did a few weeks back now. I gave that presentation on what do we learn about God and humanity from the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
The MCU really does function, I think, as modern mythology. You had mentioned looking at it from a literature standpoint. I think one of the things I've really appreciated about the MCU is fans of traditional comic books, superheroes, yeah, sure, they're drawn to it, but even those that are not your typical fans have been drawn to the MCU. It's become one of these family types of engagement. My wife, I don't know that she ever picked up a comic book in her life, but she connected to the MCU because I liked it, but more importantly, because my son Thomas had a love for it, and so she found that as a good connection with him. So talk about the aspect of maybe how it connects families, but also about modern mythology and how the MCU functions in that, much like biblical or Bible stories would, or classical storytelling.
No, I think you're 100% correct on that read. I think in general, right, film at this point in our history is modern myth making. We have, everything from, the hundreds of biopics, and, you have, again, I think there is something there is something incredible about film right now in the sense of, you have your Barbie Oppenheimer moment where one is clearly a biopic about a real person, real incident, right? And then you have the film about the literal cultural analysis of the Barbie film based upon a toy, right? But I think the MCU, and I think one of the things that happened with the MCU and is still happening in some ways, but honestly, again, I think we're going to talk about the Infinity Saga as really, truly the kind of, initial crux of it, if you will. And not to correct, there is 37 films currently. 19 television shows, 6 phases, just saying. But I think what happened truly was during that initial phase, the Infinity Saga kind of construct, I think what you saw was it hit the moment in time where not only were the films good, and again, this is meet me at the movies. This is a film critic show, so I'm sure we can debate how good some were and weren't. But they also, I think, and there's been multiple things written on the fact that, they were genre films for the most part that just stuck superheroes in, right? We've talked about before, Ant-Man is really just a heist film. It just happened to have a superhero, right? Winter Soldier is clearly a spy thriller. It just happens to be about superheroes in that regard, right? And so I think they brought in people from the genre side of things, much like, when I was teaching the class at Winthrop, first thing I would ask, they would have to write kind of their first paper for me to get to know them was to write a paper that basically said, so tell me what your experience is with Marvel. And I'd have a third who had read everything, had seen every movie, had been involved in the comics. And then I would literally have 2/3 of them who would be making reference to the fact, well, I've seen one show or I've seen one thing, but really why I'm interested in the class is my dad's interested in it, or my mom's interested in it, or my boyfriend's interest, right? And they would name somebody else, and they would talk about the fact that this was a shared moment for them, and they truly did kind of bring it together families in that regard, because dad would all of a sudden pull out a comic from 1960 where he had one of the original runs of something, and it would give them a kind of a chance to talk about, a different interest. So I think it's absolutely that kind of component for the MCU. And I think, like I said, generally film at this point is modern myth making. I mean, it is, again, Marvel itself is bringing in Zeus. I mean, they're literally bringing in past myth into their comics and to bring it into it. So absolutely, I think it's a part of that modern social.
You talk about that shared experience, and we mentioned that with family, but also there's something about the shared experience of watching a Marvel film in theaters. Especially, I mean, to me, if when people ask me, is there one moment, or can you name a few moments in cinema that will always stand out to you? The Portals scene is one of those that I will always remember. I had an early screening of that film with critics and with some others, and it was in Atlanta. I had to go to Atlanta to watch this, and I just remember that the chills. And I still, even today, when I revisit that moment, I remember that shared experience. And there were these, these cheers from the crowd, and there was true engagement. And you don't always get that with films. Sure, you can get some laughs and some tears from time to time, but to get that just roaring in that cheer, I mean, that was just unusual for me to see, and I'll always remember that.
Well, 100%. And in fact, during my Dimensions talk, I actually pulled YouTube videos. There's YouTube videos of theaters across the globe watching that moment in time. And I'll be honest with you, during some of the low parts of the pandemic, I would pull those videos up because that was 100% what I needed at that moment in time to have, is to relive that experience of not only that moment in the film, but that social moment that I had in the movie theater around that construct. 100%. Part of what I talked about, is the whole kind of idea of sense of community is very strong in the MCU. Even our solo actors eventually move into some sort of community setting. Tony Stark, the adamant bachelor by himself, right? He is the lone start of this entire MCU kind of thing. But by the end, he's a family man who has a team that he has assembled, that he goes through. Again, you could kind of take his arc and see the community that is built around him and that he creates for himself, as well as kind of the larger MCU. And I think it's that community component of it very much that goes through as a thread to the whole MCU, as well as individual films and individual moments. And I think that has spread to society in terms of that. You cannot have conversations. In fact, flipping through Instagram for my check yesterday to see what all we had posted from our end, came across a video of someone watching that literal scene for the first time. And I mean, it's just still, it is still in the zeitgeist out there that moment is a moment that it will likely not be replicated in any time soon.
Yeah, you mentioned Iron Man. I definitely want to talk a little bit about Iron Man before we go to the break and talk about a character arc. And one of the things we really saw with Iron Man and Tony Stark was sacrifice. And I think sacrifice is something that runs deep through many of these films and the characters as well. I mean, Black Widow can't help but think about that sacrifice there. How might those moments mirror biblical love and sacrifice and the idea of serving and doing for others?
Sure. One of the things that in my talk that I talked about was that one of the things I thought we learned about God and humanity from Marvel Cinematic Universe is the idea of, that I used as the example, the Ancient One talking to Doctor Strange. She's on her deathbed. She knows she's on her deathbed. They have transported out of their bodies, and they're having this conversation as they watch kind of time slip away. And at one point, she says, you know what I see for you? And he says, no, tell me what. And she goes, well, the thing that's held you back is you've never realized the singular truth, right? The singular thing. And I'm, of course, badly paraphrasing here. Your viewers can, if they don't know the scene, can go Google and we'll find it. But, she really talks about, the one thing is it's not about you. That's what has held him back, is the realization that, none of this is about you. And I think that's kind of that, again, to your point of that biblical moment of sacrifice, right? When you really start to realize, no, I've got these superpowers. I've got this ability, but it's really not about me, right? And again, a kind of classic example is, Spider-Man's origin story, right? Depending upon which version of the origin story you see. Um, but they all basically boil down to, right? Peter Parker by accident gets bit by a spider, gets super powers, and then he's kind of a teenage jerk for a period of time because all of a sudden the geeky kid can do all of these amazing things and it's all about him. And it's not until he has a tragic accident, which again, I don't feel like I'm giving a spoiler considering this is, Spider-Man's origin story in 1960 or whatever. But and in whatever version there's a tragic moment, right, that he could have stopped, prevented, and or adjusted in some way, but doesn't. And it's at that moment that it kind of comes that realization of, in a representational way, it's not about you. You now have this power, you now have this ability, and you have to start serving others. You have to start sacrificing yourself for the greater good. And again, DC likes to make that the line, right? In some ways, that's the line for DC of who's good, who's bad, right? Who's a good guy and who's a bad guy is, well, the bad guys have the power and they're just doing it for themselves. Whereas, right, the good guy is trying to stop them from serving themselves. Lex Luthor, Superman kind of thing.
So with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely.
And when you discover that, sometimes you discover that through tragedy. As we definitely saw with Spider-Man. Well, you are watching and or listening to Meet Me at the Movies. Dr. Robert Prickett joining us as we talk about the MCU and how it speaks to faith and how it speaks to humanity. After this quick intermission, we are going to come back and we're going to be talking about the Infinity Saga and maybe what that says to us about the search for hope in a broken world. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick? Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick?
Hello, welcome back to Meet Me at the Movies. I am joined by Dr. Robert Prickett, and we're talking about the MCU and how it speaks to faith and humanity. And again, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the Infinity Saga. You had mentioned a little bit about that earlier, and we want to make sure we talk about that. And also, I'd like to talk about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We see these apocalyptic storylines playing out, and not just in these two films, in several. How do you think those things mirror humanity's search for hope within a world that may be broken?
Well, and I think you kind of answered your own question in some ways, right? I think ultimately, again, back to modern mythology, right? At the core, superheroes are no different storytelling than, crooks and cops and cowboys, and it's all the white hat, black hat kind of thing, right? It's ultimately looking at in one version or another, right? Good versus evil. And I think that ultimate kind of friction, and again, you get to define, right, good and evil. And sometimes it's very much the white hat, black hat. And sometimes, right, you want to talk about Daredevil or the Punisher, we're going to get in a little gray in there.
Right.
But it's that kind of component of when you're looking for that piece of hope, right? It's ultimately, hey, in this 2 hours that I'm going to spend here, this 2.5 hours I'm going to spend here, I am confident, and the hope that I'm going to have is that the good guys are going to win. And there is a component in that mythology where that is kind of morally and societally what you want to have happen, right? There is that hope that even in the darkest hour, right, dead of night, um, here's my Green Lantern light, right?
Yeah.
There is going to be that component of somebody's going to be there to help and support and fight for the good, and ultimately they're going to win. Now, it may take you 7 hours in the case of, right, the last two Avengers movies combined together, right? But ultimately, right, even in the darkest moment, the end of the first Avengers, right, film, when Thanos has won, right, there's still a moment of hope because it ends with the kind of the post-credit scene, and the post-credit scene gives you a little bit of hope because it's not completely done, and you know it's coming back, and there's going to be another one, right? And so I think that is part of that mythology. I think, we as Christians, one of the things that I talked about in my talk was, death is not the end, right? Loki has died several hundred times at this point, um, you know, during the thing. But even within the MCU, right? To the question of how in this apocalyptic world, right? The Infinity Saga, they blipped half of the existence out. Um, but did they really? And look, the good guys are going to come back. And hey, wait, now we get into this thing where we can go back and there's still an order to the universe and a logic to the universe, and we can correct it so that ultimately the good guys are going to win, right? And so they weren't really blipped out of existence for long in their eyes, right? It seemed to be a continuous blip for the people that got blipped,
Right.
which is just now fun. I'm just realizing it's just now fun to continue to use blip in that way. Conversation piece. But I think that's ultimately kind of one of those pieces of that is looking at that component, and I think Marvel does a good job, even in some of their darker. I mean, again, and we've talked before. Marvel very much set up as kind of one of their operating principles when they started the comics back in the 60s was the idea that they were going to make them human. They wanted their superheroes to be more human than what Superman was. Superman, especially early on, I mean, he is a sun god alien. I mean, there is, and then they realized, wait a minute, he can't be a complete God, little g, big G kind of character. We've got to have some sort of something, right? And so they come up with kryptonite, and then they give one little piece of weakness to him, and there it is, right? Marvel very much came with a different mindset of, hey, we're going to bring in Peter Parker, who's a teenage kid. We're going to do Iron Man, who has all sorts of issues, right? And they're going to be human people set in humans, real world situations. They come from, New York City is a place in the Marvel universe, whereas DC, it's Gotham. New York City's not there in the Marvel universe or DC. So Marvel really tried to start with that kind of recognition of, no, we want to exist in the real world as much as possible.
I think the flaws that we see in many of these characters that consider themselves heroic, many are deeply flawed. How do you think those imperfections can help us reflect and relate to the kind of the human condition and even the ideas of grace and redemption?
Oh, I think the brilliant stroke is the fact that, again, I don't know that you're going to see yourself in Superman, right? Especially if you kind of go back to original comics, right? That was not a thing. You were not going to see yourself in Superman, as there is the possibility you're going to see yourself in one of the Marvel characters. You as a human are going to see yourself in these situations, and you're going to relate to the situations. Again, to step out of the MCU for a second, Daredevil struggles with all of the tragedies in his life that are inherent in the comics, right? He struggles with faith. He struggles with his father's loss. He struggles. He is handicapped, right? He's blind, even though he's a superhero. He has all sorts of struggles that many people can go. and recognize and kind of see in that character as they're recognizing the tremendous super heroic things that he is doing. And I think that's one of those pieces where I think that's what kind of in some ways, and again, I'll use my wife as an example, right? She has character. She was not a comic book character. She has gone through the MCU in part because of the social construct that we have as a married couple, and but she has characters she likes. She has characters that she has connected with. And again, a good film is going to do that anyway, as we know. But I think to your larger question of how does that help us in terms of kind of seeing it in a broader context, right? I think it's those connections that allow you then to start having those reflective moments in yourself where depending upon how that character does something, well, then wait a minute, that's going to take you down this reflective road about, oh, was that the right choice? Again, I'll use my wife. Huge Star-Lord fan, loves Star-Lord fan, hates him now because he is stupid and could have stopped things well before things got bad, right? He made bad decisions. And she will not forgive him for those decisions. Again, I'm not going to go into the, kind of the thing, but it allows her that arc, but it also allows her that kind of component of not only connecting with them from a purely theatrical kind of way, but I would argue it also allows that component for reflection and connection to continue through in her own kind of evaluation.
Well, that choice that Star-Lord made was about as human of a choice as I think that any
100%.
of us. I mean, you
That's right.
think about
100%.
it was because of loss and grief that decision was made, and it
100%.
changed everything. Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
if anyone who has had loss and grief, they can connect to that. They can
100%.
see that. Dr. Robert Prickett, thanks for joining us, Professor and Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Gardner-Webb University, talking about the MCU and what it says about God and humanity. Thanks for doing this. I'd love to have you back sometime.
Absolutely.
We'll definitely make it a plan and make sure it happens. And any final thoughts or comments you want to make sure you share before we wrap?
So the only thing I'm going to say, because I got asked last time because we did a little podcast earlier, and I got asked and I got called out from the fact that I couldn't cite sources. So if nothing else, I'm going to point you to, and Noel, this is as much for you as it is for anybody watching. So if you don't know, I put it back here so I'd have it. So if you don't know this book, Super Gods by Grant Morrison, this is like the best history of conversation of analysis of forever of comics and superheroes.
Awesome.
So
awesome. Good deal. And if people wanted to follow any of your work or read any of the stuff that you've done, what's the best way to do that?
I'm an academic, so first of all, it's not going to be, you're going to have to go digging into some journals to go find that stuff. So good luck. Appreciate the shout out. Go to your local university library, and you'll have to get into some databases to do that stuff.
So we'll just bring you back here. We'll do that.
Sure. I was going to say, I will happily come talk about any graphic novels, pop culture, anything you want, Noel.
Appreciate you guys as always for spending time to watch us and engage with us. We know you have a lot to do, and so when you choose to be with us, we know it's an investment, and we thank you for that investment. So until next time, for Meet Me at the Movies and the entire C19 cast and crew, I'm Noel T. Manning II. For Dr. Robert Prickett, and for this week, that is a wrap.
Many films to view until we meet again. Next time we see you, we'll gladly fill you in. We'll tell about the happy and the sad ones. We'll talk about the good ones and the bad ones. Many films to view till we meet again.